statement on Ukraine, I call the Defence Secretary of State.
With permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to make a statement on Ukraine. But before I begin, I'd like to inform the House that yesterday we secured a £10 billion contract to supply Norway with at least 5 Type 26 frigates. This is the biggest British warship deal in our history. It strengthens NATO and our northern flank. It supports 4,000 British jobs and 400 British businesses for years to come. And it is showing that this government is making defence an engine for growth across the regions and nations of the United Kingdom. Turning to Ukraine, Madam Deputy Speaker. A few days ago, Ukrainians around the world came together to mark a special day. 34 years of their country's independence, 34 years as a proud and sovereign nation. And Ukrainians continue to fight for that freedom with huge courage, military and civilians alike, 3.5 years on from the start of Putin's brutal, full-scale invasion. A secure Europe needs a strong Ukraine. Their freedom is our freedom, their values are our values, and this is why the UK stands with Ukraine, and this is why this House stands united for Ukraine. And when Ukraine marks their next Independence Day, we all hope to see them celebrate in a time of peace and not in a time of war. Madam Deputy Speaker, over the summer, the UK, with our allies, have been working hard to make that hope a reality. The Prime Minister hosted President Zelensky in London. He chaired various Coalition of the Willing meetings with President Macron, and he joined European leaders with President Zelensky to meet President Trump in Washington, D.C. I've spoken with defence ministers across the coalition about stepping up military support and about securing a peace after any deal. And our military leaders have met multiple times to strengthen international contributions to the coalition, also known now as the Multinational Force Ukraine. We welcome President Trump's dedication to bringing this terrible war to an end, and we strongly welcome his commitment to make security guarantees, as he says, very secure with the Europeans. At every stage, President Zelensky continues his support for a full, unconditional ceasefire and for talks on a lasting peace. And yet Putin's response has been to launch some of the largest attacks on Ukraine since the start of the war. During last week's onslaught on Kyiv, at least 23 people were killed, 4 of whom were children, including a 2-year-old. And the attack on the British Council was an outrage. A Russian missile fired into a civilian area as part of an illegal war, damaging a British government building and injuring a civilian worker. Now it appears that Putin is refusing a meeting with President Trump and President Zelensky. So while Ukraine wants peace, Putin wages war. And President Trump is right. We must continue pushing for peace, as well as increasing pressure on Putin to come to the table. So we support measures to disrupt Russian oil revenues, and we welcome President Trump's comments that he is weighing very serious economic sanctions on Russia. And the Foreign Secretary will have more to say on similar UK action very soon. Madam Deputy Speaker, on the battlefield, intense fighting continues along the front line. And while Russian military activity has reduced in the Kharkiv and Sumy oblasts, as Russian ground forces relocate elements of those forces, over the past 2 weeks, they have advanced in the northern Donetsk region. Pokrovsk remains Russia's focus, and its forces are using a variety of methods to infiltrate Ukrainian positions. But Putin continues only to make minor territorial gains, and at a huge cost. The most recent assessment of the UK Defence Intelligence estimates that at the current pace since January, it would take Russia another 4.4 years to seize the Donbass, at a cost of almost 2 million more Russian casualties. Despite this, the increasing escalation of Russia's devastating drone strikes is a serious concern. In July, Russia launched approximately 6,200 one-way attack drones into Ukraine, another monthly record. Yet in one night alone, over this weekend, Russia launched nearly 540 drones and 45 missiles. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK government is stepping up our efforts for Ukraine, and our priorities are simple. Support the fight today, secure the peace tomorrow. On support for the fight today, we are providing £4.5 billion in military aid for Ukraine this year, the highest ever level. And at the last Ukraine Defence Contact Group meeting, with over 50 nations and partners in July, I launched a 50-day drive to accelerate the assistance we're giving. 50 days on, the Ukraine has delivered to Ukraine nearly 5 million rounds of munitions, around 60,000 artillery shells, rockets and missiles, 2,500 uncrewed platforms, 30 vehicles and engineering equipment, and 200 electronic warfare and air defence systems. Madam Deputy Speaker, we will not jeopardise the peace by forgetting about the war. So next week I will also co-chair the 30th UDCG meeting with Germany's Minister Pistorius, alongside NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte and 50 other allies and partners. And I will host an E5 Defence Ministers Summit in London next week, where we will be joined by the Ukrainian Defence Minister, where together we will step up still further our support for Ukraine. And then to secure the peace tomorrow, the UK continues with the French to lead the coalition of the willing. 200 military planners from more than 30 nations have helped design plans in the event of a ceasefire. Plans to secure the skies and seas and to train Ukrainian forces to defend their nation. This week, I will host defence ministers from across the coalition with French Minister Le Cornu to further cement contributions to that coalition. And for the armed forces, I'm reviewing readiness levels and accelerating funding to prepare for any possible deployment. Peace is possible, and we will be ready. And the Prime Minister and I will ensure that the House is fully informed of developments in the proper way. Madam Deputy Speaker, may I take this opportunity today to pay tribute to one of the driving figures of the Coalition of the Willing, Admiral Sir Tony Radakin, whose last day as our UK Chief of the Defence Staff is today. Tony's had a distinguished 35-year military career in the armed forces, serving in operations right across the globe. He's widely respected and as a true friend of the Ukrainian people, as President Zelensky himself said last week. And I'm sure everyone in the House will join me in thanking Tony for his outstanding service and wish every success to his successor as CDS, Air Chief Marshal Rich Knighton. And let me end then by saying that while President Putin likes to project strength, he is now weaker than ever. Since Putin launched his illegal invasion, he's not achieved any of his strategic aims. He's lost more than 10,000 tanks and armoured vehicles, and his Black Sea fleet has been humiliated. He's forced to rely on states like Iran for drones, North Korea for frontline troops, and China for technology and components. He's using 40% of his total government spending on the war, with interest rates now running at 18% and inflation at 9%. And moreover, Putin now faces a bigger NATO, 32 nations strong, with an agreement to raise national spending on security to 5% by 2035, and he faces a Ukraine more determined than ever to control its own future. Madam Deputy Speaker, a secure Europe needs a strong, sovereign Ukraine, and we in the Ukraine, we in the UK, will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes.
I call the Shadow Defence Secretary of State, James Cartledge.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Secretary of State for advice.